You have heard of it. Maybe you have read it. Maybe it sits on your shelf right now. Spine cracked. Pages highlighted. Margin notes from the version. Of you that believed this book was going to change everything. Think and Grow Rich. 100 million copies sold. Cited by more self-made millionaires than any other book in history. Recommended in every success course. Every entrepreneurship program. Every motivational speech from here to Singapore. And here is the shocking truth. Most people who read it completely miss what it is actually about. Not the surface message. Not the goals and the affirmations. And the burning desire and the mastermind groups. Those are real. Those are in there. But underneath all of that, hidden in plain sight, woven through every chapter, whispering beneath every principle, there is something else. Something Napoleon Hill tried to tell you directly, and most people read right past. Something he called the secret. He mentioned it in the very first chapter. He said, "The secret to which I refer has been mentioned no fewer than 100 times throughout this book, yet it has not been directly named because it seems to work more successfully when it is merely uncovered and left in sight where those who are ready and searching for it will notice it." He hid it in plain sight for 60 years. Over 100 million readers have held the secret in their hands, and most of them read it as a book about money. It was never a book about money. Today we're going to find what they missed. It is 1937, Depression-era America. Breadlines, dust bowls, a country that has forgotten what abundance feels like. A country of people who have stopped believing that the gap between poverty and prosperity is crossable. A 54-year-old man sits down and finishes a manuscript he has been working on for 20 years. 20 years, not 20 months, not 20 weeks. 20 years of research, of poverty, of ridicule, of watching his own life collapse while he studied the lives of the successful. His name is Napoleon Hill, and the book he has just finished will not be understood by most of the people who read it. But let us go back further, because the book did not begin in 1937. It began in 1908, in a conversation between a 25-year-old journalist with no money and no prospects and the richest man in the world, Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie did not give Hill money. He gave him something more dangerous. He gave him an idea. He said, "The philosophy of achievement that I and men like me have used to build our fortunes has never been organized and written down in a form that ordinary people can access. I want you to do that. I want you to spend the next 20 years studying the most successful men in America, and I want you to find the common denominator, the one thing beneath all the different industries and personalities and strategies that they all share." Hill shook Carnegie's hand and then spent the next 20 years doing exactly that. He interviewed Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Theodore Roosevelt, John D. Rockefeller, Alexander Graham Bell, over 500 of the most successful Americans of the early 20th century. He went broke doing it. Multiple times. His personal life fell apart. He was mocked, dismissed, called a fraud and a dreamer, and a man chasing something that did not exist. And at the end of 20 years, he found it, the secret, and he hid it in a book that 100 million people would hold in their hands and mostly misread, including, very possibly, you. Here is the struggle that lives at the heart of Think and Grow Rich. Not Hill's struggle, yours. The struggle of a person who has read the right words and applied them in the wrong direction. Because here is what most people do when they read this book. They read the chapter on desire and they set a financial goal. They read the chapter on faith and they visualize a bank balance. They read the chapter on the mastermind principle and they think about networking events and business partnerships, and then they wonder why. After years of goal setting and visualization and affirmation, the bank balance looks exactly the same. They are pointing the telescope at the moon and wondering why they cannot see the stars. Because the book is not a manual for getting rich. It is a manual for becoming someone who cannot stay poor. Those are two completely different projects, and the difference between them is everything. Getting rich is a destination, a number, a transaction between effort and reward that you can theoretically game if you find the right strategy. Becoming someone who cannot stay poor is a transformation, a complete interior foundational renovation of who you are, at the level where your decisions actually originate. Hill watched this misunderstanding unfold in real time. He watched people apply his principles to their income and produce nothing. He watched the same principles, applied to their identity, produce complete life transformation. And he tried in the text, in the language, in the very structure of the book, to point at the distinction. But we are impatient creatures, we want the money. We skip the becoming. And in skipping the becoming, we guarantee that whatever money arrives will not stay. That whatever success accumulates will not last. That whatever we build from the outside without first building it on the inside will eventually collapse, because the foundation was never built. That is the struggle, not the lack of strategy. The refusal to do the interior work first. Here is the moment that changes everything in Napoleon Hill's own story, not the publication of the book. Not the interviews with Carnegie or Edison or Ford, the moment his deaf son Blair hears for the first time. Blair Hill was born without ears, no external ear canals. The medical establishment of his time had a clear and unanimous verdict. This child will never hear. This child will never speak normally. This child will live a limited life, and the family should prepare themselves for that reality. Napoleon Hill refused. Not loudly, not angrily, not with a dramatic declaration that he was going to fight the medical establishment. Quietly, with a specific, focused, daily application of the very principles he was writing about, he made a decision, a burning, total, non-negotiable decision that his son was going to hear. That the limitation the world had declared was not a fact, but a hypothesis. And that his job as a father was not to prepare his son for limitation, but to program his son's mind with the certainty of possibility. He transmitted that certainty through touch, through vibration, through years of daily, patient, loving communication that said without words, because words were not yet available, you are not limited. You will hear. The world is richer than what the doctors can measure. Blair Hill eventually developed functional hearing, not through surgery, not through a medical breakthrough, through the sustained application of a philosophy to a human mind before that mind had decided what was possible. And that moment, that result, that proof that the principles worked at the level of human potential rather than financial strategy, that is the turning point, because it revealed what the secret actually was. The secret was not a technique. The secret was this: the mind, properly directed, cannot be permanently limited by external circumstances. Not illness, not poverty, not deafness, not the unanimous verdict of every expert in any room. The mind properly directed finds a way, always, and Think and Grow Rich is not a book about finding money. It is a manual for properly directing your mind. Napoleon Hill made a deliberate choice when he named this book. He knew what would sell in Depression-era America. He knew what people needed to believe was possible. He knew that a book called Think and Transform Yourself Completely at the level of identity and then watch external circumstances rearrange themselves, accordingly would not move copies off the shelf in 1937. So he wrote Think and Grow Rich, and he pointed the title at money because money was what people were desperate for. But he pointed the content at something much larger. He pointed the content at the operating system, not the apps you run on it. The operating system itself. The deep, foundational, largely invisible set of beliefs, habits, and automatic patterns that determine what decisions you make before you even know you are making them. He called it the subconscious mind. And he argued, with 20 years of evidence from 500 of the most successful people in America, that the subconscious mind is the entire ballgame. Not your intelligence, not your education, not your connections or your timing or your luck. The subconscious mind, the part of you that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, long after you have put the book down and gone to sleep, making thousands of micro decisions that collectively determine whether your life trends toward the thing you say you want or away from it. Feed it the right material consistently over time with genuine emotional conviction, and it becomes your most powerful ally. Leave it to be programmed by circumstance and fear and other people's opinions of what is possible for you, and it becomes the most efficient limitation you will ever face. Lesson 2. Hill spent an entire chapter on faith, and most people read it as the religious or spiritual chapter. They either embrace it uncritically or they skip it as inapplicable. Both responses miss the point. Hill was not talking about religious faith. He was talking about a psychological technology. He was describing the process by which the subconscious mind accepts a new reality as true, not because the evidence supports it yet, but because it has been rehearsed so thoroughly, so emotionally, so consistently, that the gap between the imagined and the real begins to close. Every world-class athlete who visualizes the perfect performance before they perform it is doing exactly what Hill described. Every entrepreneur who walks through their future company in their mind before it exists is doing exactly what Hill described. Every parent who speaks to their child not as the child currently is, but as the person the child is capable of becoming is doing exactly what Hill described. Faith is not hoping something is true. Faith is rehearsing something is true until the rehearsal becomes reality. It is the most powerful form of practice available to a human being, and it costs nothing except the willingness to do it consistently before the evidence arrives. Most people wait for the evidence before they believe. Hill said, "Believe first and you create the conditions for the evidence to appear." That is not mysticism. That is the documented psychology of how human beings build toward extraordinary outcomes. Lesson 3. The real mastermind principle. Has nothing to do with networking. Hill's chapter on the mastermind principle is one of the most misapplied ideas in the entire personal development canon. Most people read it and think, I need a group of successful people to meet with regularly and share ideas. That is the surface. Beneath it is something far more radical. Hill argued that when two or more minds come together in a spirit of harmony and focused purpose, a third mind is created that is greater than the sum of its parts. That the blending of focused, aligned human minds produces a quality of intelligence and creative power that no individual mind can access alone. He was not talking about a networking group. He was talking about alignment. Most people are not a unified mind working toward a clear purpose. They are a divided mind, consciously wanting one thing, subconsciously expecting another, spending enormous energy on the surface behavior of success while the deep programming pulls consistently in the opposite direction. The real mastermind work, the work that Hill was pointing at, is the work of aligning those two minds, of getting your conscious desire and your subconscious expectation moving in the same direction at the same time. When that alignment happens, truly happens not as a performance but as a genuine interior state, things begin to move. Not magically, mechanically, because a unified mind is an extraordinarily efficient engine, and a divided mind is an engine running against itself. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it honestly. Not the answer you would give if someone were watching, the answer that lives in the quiet. Do you actually believe you are going to get what you say you want? Not do you hope for it? Not do you want it? Not do you work toward it? Do you believe it? Because here is what Napoleon Hill found across 20 years and 500 of the most extraordinary lives of his era. The gap between the people who achieved everything they set out to achieve and the people who wanted it just as badly and never broke through was not intelligence. It was not opportunity. It was not even effort, it was this. The achievers had found a way to genuinely believe in the subconscious operating system, 24 hours a day sense of the word that their outcome was inevitable. Not possible. Not likely. Inevitable. They had rehearsed it so completely, held it so consistently, refused to let the contrary evidence dislodge it so persistently that their subconscious had accepted it as a done deal and begun arranging everything accordingly. And the people who struggled, who worked hard and applied strategies and read the right books and attended the right seminars, and still arrived at 65 with the gap between where they were and where they wanted to be wider than it had been at 30. They had never crossed that interior threshold. They had never gotten their deep programming to agree with their conscious ambition. Think and Grow Rich is not a book about thinking your way to money. It is a book about closing the gap between what you consciously want and what you subconsciously expect. And the shocking truth, the one hiding in plain sight across 100 million copies, is that most people never do that work. They apply the principles to the outside of their life while the inside runs on the old programming. And the old programming always wins, until you change it. So here is where we land, not with a reading recommendation, not with a summary of chapters, not with a list of Napoleon Hill's principles numbered and organized for easy reference, with a challenge. A single, specific, deeply uncomfortable challenge. Find the gap. Find the specific place where your conscious desire and your subconscious expectation are pointing in opposite directions. Find the thing you say you want that your deep programming has not yet agreed to deliver. Find the internal contradiction between the goal you are chasing and the identity that your daily automatic choices are building. Because that gap, that specific, findable, closable gap, is the only thing standing between where you are and where you are trying to go. Not the strategy, not the opportunity, not the economy or the timing or the connections you do not have yet. The gap. Close it. Not by working harder on the outside, by working deeper on the inside. By doing what Napoleon Hill documented 500 extraordinary people doing, quietly, consistently, daily, before the world ever confirmed that they were right about themselves. Read the book again if you have read it before. This time, do not look for the money advice. Look for the secret. It is mentioned no fewer than 100 times. Hill told you exactly where to find it. He just trusted you to look past the title. Now you know what you are looking for. Go find it. If this video cracked something open in you, share it with one person who has read Think and Grow Rich and missed the secret. Leave a comment telling me the gap you just identified between what you want and what you actually believe. Subscribe to Motivation Arc because every week we go beneath the surface of the ideas that everyone has heard and find the truth that most people miss. Napoleon Hill hid the secret in plain sight. You just found it. Now use it. We will see you in the next one.